Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's public safety briefing led by Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Phil Banks. Following our last speaker, we will take a few questions from the media, followed by some questions that have been submitted by the public ahead of today's briefing. I would now like to turn it over to Deputy Mayor Phil Banks.
Good afternoon and welcome. We are here today to give an update on the ongoing air quality health condition as a result of the smoke that's coming from the wildflowers in Canada. I'm joined here today by the New York City Emergency Management. We refer to it as NYSEM, Commissioner Zachary Iscol, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene Commissioner, Dr. Fasson, and also the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, Acting Executive Director, Victoria Cirillo. Conditions may appear to have improved since early this week, but does not mean that we are in the clear, particularly for sensitive groups. And those groups include adults, children and teenagers, people with lung diseases such as asthma, heart disease, diabetes, and people who are active outdoors. So there's a few things that we want to start with. We want you to stay indoors as much as possible. If you can stay indoors, we would like for you to stay indoors. If you do need to be outside, we ask that you mask up with a high quality and well-fitting N95 or K95 mask. When you're inside your home, keep the air clean by closing the doors and windows if possible. And certainly, last but not least, know your risk and your risk factors. We need you to check on your loved ones, your friends, and your neighbors. And with that, we're going to first hear from Mr. Iscol. Zachary.
Yes, sir.
What's going on?
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time to be able to do this update, and always great to be here with you and with Dr. Fasson and our fellow colleagues. So first off, just want to start by saying, we're with our Canadian neighbors to the north. We know how tough this is for them, and we wish them all the best in their endeavors to fight these fires, and we are thinking of them. I also just want to say, excuse me, how proud I am of our team, not only at New York City Emergency Management, but across the city. My team in particular, we've been managing, our respite center operations, the migrant crisis, asylum seekers. We've been in a full-on activation now for over a month, and the team has really done a remarkable job on this endeavor, along with our agency partners. Times like this, the number one thing that we need to worry about for these types of events is protecting our city's most vulnerable. And that's exactly what our city and our fellow agencies have been doing. It started last Thursday on June 1st with some notifications that went out through Notify NYC, which is the city's advanced warning system. It's really important that everybody signs up for Notify NYC. This is where we give you information on everything from traffic, weather events, any types of information you need to know to keep yourself and your loved ones safe comes through Notify NYC. We have over 1 million subscribers. It's available in 14 languages, including American Sign Language. You can sign up by going to 311, by downloading the app, or by going to nyc.gov/notify. So we started messaging about really, what people need to do, recommendations, and about sort of some issues with air quality going back to last Thursday. Still, this is something that's been very fast moving, very difficult to predict and forecast air quality and smoke. Generally, the forecast only goes 24 hours out, and we didn't see any forecasting of the levels that we saw a couple days ago. And yet still, the city responded very quickly to protect our most vulnerable, doing expanded outreach through Department of Social Services with our homeless outreach teams. This is similar to the stuff that we would do during what we call a Code Blue, which is what we do during winter weather or extreme cold weather, or Code Red, which is what we do during heat. Really making sure we're outreaching to our most vulnerable and making sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our homeless. We also had Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs reaching out to immigrant communities, reaching out to delivery workers, making sure they had the information that they need. MOPD, Department of the Aging, doing their outreach, in addition to all the hospital surveillance and EMS surveillance of response times to make sure that, again, we're protecting our city's most vulnerable. In addition to that, we are now distributing masks across hundreds of firehouses and precincts across the city. And so I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Really important when we think about emergency preparedness. We tell everybody to have a go bag, to be prepared. You are your own first line of defense in an emergency. One of the things that you really should have in your go bag is masks for yourself and your loved ones and your family members, people living with you. So now's an opportunity to do that. You can get them at your local precinct or firehouse. In terms of where we are with the forecast, again, I always want to caveat this by saying air quality and smoke are very, very difficult to forecast. With that said, it looks like things are moving in the right direction. Air quality is very, very improved today. Current visibility is unrestricted. AQIs, which is the air quality index, you can see that on the screen right now, is within 30 to 60. That's in the, generally the green to moderate zone, meaning really in the higher ranges in the forecast today for as a high of a possible 105. That really means that the only people that really need to be concerned, and Dr. Vassan will go into this a little bit more, are people with specific conditions. Through the weekend, tonight, we are monitoring one plume on satellite imagery that could move back across the city tonight. Nothing like what we saw the last couple of days, hopefully. Again, difficult to forecast. And then looking for improvements throughout the weekend. We then have a front moving in Monday, Tuesday that should push everything out. But again, this is the new normal in this era of climate change. The fires are still raging across Canada, and so we will continue to monitor this and make sure everybody has the information they need to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. Again, cannot emphasize this enough. That starts with Notify NYC. So please make sure that you download it, you sign up for it, or you call 311 to get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So let's go over this. So the normal air we're saying is when it's between approximately 30 to 60.
So that's where we are today in the city.
Right.
Normal is, and Dr. Fassan, what is normal in the city generally? Is it about 50?
For this time of year, we're normally between 0 and 50, which would be in the green or healthy levels. Though, as you've said and we've said before, it's not uncommon when you have a period of high temperature and not too many storms, high heat, to have a day where the AQI is above 100 for a day. But typically, it doesn't last longer.
So now, if you need a mask, right, and we're suggesting that if you have to, we want you to stay indoors if possible, but we know that that's not always possible. If you do have to go out, we want you to stay with the N95 or K95, a well-fitting mask. If you need one, we can go to a police precinct
or firehouse.
Or firehouse to be able to pick up a mask for yourself.
Yes, sir.
That's correct. So now with this plume coming in, and this is supposed to scheduled to come in when?
So we're looking at this possibly coming in sometime later this evening, overnight. Again, very hard to predict. It depends on the winds, but we do see a smoke plume to the west, further to the west.
Okay, so just, we want everyone to know that the ferries are operating on normal schedule. All city services are continuing, with the exception of alternate side parking. I don't know if that's a city service, but that will be suspended for today. That has been suspended for today. Beaches are open today. And again, we will continue to monitor the situation, but we do expect them to be open throughout the weekend. Okay, so Doc, we heard from you, but we need to go to a little more clarity. So Doc is the top doctor in the city, and he's now going to brief you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Good to be here with you this afternoon. I'm Ashwin Vasan, the New York City Health Commissioner, here to give you the official health guidance on my behalf and on behalf of the Department of Health. Just want to clarify a little bit on Deputy Mayor's comments and other previous comments about specific guidance to New Yorkers for today and for the coming days over the weekend. As we look outside, as you can see, the skies are clearing. This is good news. The morning air quality index was in the mid-60s. That's down from 400 plus just a few days ago. It's still a little higher than normal. As I just said, it's usually below 50, between 0 and 50. And we're typically at healthy levels. We expect to get there, as Commissioner Iscol said, in the coming days. Forecasts suggest that this improved weather will continue, but the AQI could fluctuate over the weekend. We do not expect it to reach hazardous levels, though, again, qualifying that with what Commissioner Iscol said, it's hard to predict what winds will do. With all of these changes, that means our guidance to New Yorkers changes. Rather than encouraging everyone to stay indoors, as much as possible, we recommend limiting time outside and reducing activity levels if you are unusually sensitive to particle pollution. What that means for New Yorkers is people with heart or breathing problems or older adults may be still sensitive to the current conditions in the air. These people should limit time outdoors and should avoid prolonged and intense outdoor activities. For all New Yorkers, listen to your body. If your eyes are watering, or your throat is sore, or you're out of breath, go inside if you can. If you cannot go inside, please put on a high filtration mask. And of course, if you're really having trouble breathing, if you're suffering chest pain, if you're suffering severe shortness of breath, if you're feeling dizzy like you want to pass out, please call 911. For children and families, children with asthma are especially sensitive to poor air quality and should still limit time outdoors. As a father of 3 young kids, I expect to be outside this weekend, but I'm going to check on how my children are feeling regularly, watching for watery eyes, sore throats, and shortness of breath. And I'll bring them inside if they're showing any signs of this irritation. Parents and caregivers across our city should do the same. For events can proceed as planned on public health grounds. We'd recommend that New Yorkers as individuals gauge their own levels of risk and comfort with being outside. If you have to be outside and you do fall into one of those high-risk categories, please wear a high filtration mask. Those continue to be a useful tool if you want or need them. N95 masks are available for pickup at local police precincts and firehouses citywide. Wearing a high-quality mask can reduce your exposure to harmful pollutants. The clear air, of course, is a welcome change, but we also know how quickly conditions can deteriorate and wind can shift, so please stay informed. We have many tools to help. Our health department website, nyc.gov/health/air quality. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Sign up for Notify NYC and follow the current air quality index at airnow.gov. We look forward to continuing to communicate with you in the days ahead should anything change. It's been an intense and a little bit scary week. New Yorkers deserve a very pleasant weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So make no mistake, these wildfires are a climate issue. Mayor Adams joined the mayors of Montreal, Toronto, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. today in issuing a call to action to governments at all levels to address the global climate crisis and the public health emergency. Here in the city, that work is handled by the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. And now I'd like to turn it over to the Executive Director, Cirillo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good afternoon. I'm Vicki Cerullo, Acting Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. As we all know, the poor air quality New Yorkers have experienced recently was the result of smoke from Canadian wildfires that spread to our region. But those fires are a direct result of climate change. Wildfires are getting more common around the world due to increased temperatures and drought. This kind of thing has been happening in Brazil, Indonesia, and California, now Canada, which has 9% of the world's forests. This year's season in Canada has come early. The intensity and number of fires are higher, and wildlife season is peaking earlier. Unless we accelerate our efforts to combat climate change, these fires and other extreme weather events will become more and more common. One note that's extremely important to make, this week's smoke, just like every other climate emergency to hit our city, has the worst impacts on the most vulnerable. As Dr. Vassan mentioned, emergency room visits for asthma have increased in the past 2 days, and we know that our city's biggest asthma clusters are located in areas that have borne the brunt of our city's pollution. Those visits have now decreased, but the pre-existing conditions that lead to these disparate impacts remain. The most important thing we can do is to continue our work to reduce our emissions so this problem doesn't keep getting worse. To that end, we're electrifying 100 schools by 2030, focusing on areas that experience high childhood asthma hospitalizations. We're phasing out dirty, polluting number 4 fuel oil to 2025 in schools and 2027 in all buildings. We are phasing out fossil fuels in city-owned buildings broadly, and with Local Law 97, we are leading the nation in electrifying our buildings, the city's largest source of emissions. Because of the disparate impacts of air pollution, we will be creating a low-emissions freight zone in high-pollution neighborhoods, the first of its kind on the East Coast. We're cracking down on unlawful idling to reduce air pollution from truck traffic, and we're helping New Yorkers that must drive to drive electric through creating a robust charging network. New York City is leading the nation and the world in preparing our city for a warming, changing world. We will continue to focus our efforts on those most vulnerable to climate emergencies, and we will build a more sustainable, more resilient, and more just New York for generations to come.
So now, Director, you mentioned that Canada has what percentage of the world's forests?
9%.
9%. But we have never experienced it in New York, any of the fires in Canada now, right? So that is this. Could this be a new norm for us as it relates to the fires in Canada?
As climate change is accelerating the conditions like drought that exacerbate wildfires,
Right.
yes.
You know, for many New Yorkers, we hear about the firefighters in California, and I know that you say, wow, you wish well, but now it's actually home. And one of the ways in which we have to combat that is through information intelligence and passing that information along. So any of the points that you picked up here today that was useful and valuable, please share it with someone who was not listening today. And I certainly, as important as anything you've heard today over the weekend, as the doc said that he's going to be checking with on his children, check on a neighbor, check on a friend, give a call, make sure we're all right. We can combat this if we combat it together, and if we do not work together, then that road is going to be a very, very steep uphill. And I'd just like to thank everyone here. Anything else you'd like to add, Commissioner?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that ad.
Yeah. Anyone like to add? Anything else? Okay.
Seeing as there's no hands raised in the chat, we will move to the public question portion. So thank you. Earlier this week, the administration reached out to New Yorkers, asking them to submit questions for the officials that have joined us here today. We will now get to as many of those questions as we can with the amount of time that we have left. Our first question comes from Irina in Queens for Commissioner Iskel. She asks, will there be strategies set in place to predict future poor air quality events? If so, how far in advance can we expect to see advisories?
It's a great question. Forecasting for air quality is notoriously difficult, and not to overcomplicate this, but there's also a difference between forecasting for smoke and forecasting for air quality. Drivers of air quality, can be things like pollen, other types of pollution. Smoke is only one factor in this. Generally, the forecasting is done by New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation. They put out their forecast every day for the next day, and that forecasting for air quality really only goes out about 24 hours in advance. It's my hope that we sort of get better at forecasting for air quality, but that's where the science is today. There are some other sort of ones that maybe go out 48 hours that you can watch, but I think as we saw this week, Monday's forecast for Tuesday, Tuesday's forecast for Wednesday were wildly off. They were off by hundreds of points. And I think that speaks to how difficult it is to do this. And a lot of this is sort of tracking it the day before, putting out the messaging, and the day before, if you see that it's the potential for poor air quality, in the way that if you saw potential for rain, you take an umbrella, take a mask out with you.
I believe Dr. Vassan already touched on this during his remarks, but we'll ask him to reiterate it for Cynthia in Queens, who asks, how do we keep our children and elderly adults safe? How do we reduce our exposure and symptoms to pollutants?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I did address it. If you have to be outside, wear a mask. Pay attention to the symptoms that your body might be feeling: headache, watery eyes, itchy throat, and really go indoors if you are feeling those symptoms. If you are a vulnerable person, if you have a medical comorbidity like lung disease, heart disease, if you're at risk of stroke, if your immune system is weak, limit your time outside, and certainly limit the amount of strenuous activity. And for our kids, pay attention to how they're feeling. Ask them how they're feeling, watch how they're feeling, and if they show any signs of not feeling well, bring them indoors and limit their exposure. The air quality is going to fluctuate, but it's not going to be anywhere as hazardous as it's been over Tuesday and Wednesday.
Next question comes from Sherlyn in Queens for Executive Director Cerullo, who asks, have you tested the air quality in order to know exactly what type of chemicals and particles have been in the air?
Sure. Well, our Department of Environmental Protection and Department of Health do very high quality air monitoring. We are aware of PM 2.5, which is the harmful toxic pollutant I think we've all experienced at a much higher magnitude for the last couple of days, something that we monitor regularly. And it's actually why we're doing the work that we're doing to reduce emissions. Not only does PM 2.5 get emitted through wildfires, it's transportation, it's our buildings. And so our climate and environmental justice efforts to reduce emissions are part of that work, but I will pass it to Dr. Fasan for more.
Yeah, thank you for that. PM 2.5 is essentially a measure of the size of these particulates in the air, and that we know that at a particular size, 2.5 or higher, that can cause damage to your lungs, damage to your mucous membranes, damage to your heart and your internal organs. And so that's why we track that as a measurable indicator. And of course, smoke is a major source of PM 2.5 quantity. So are car exhausts, building exhausts, which is why this city has led for years, and in this administration as well, on reducing building emissions, car emissions, and improving the quality of our air overall, such that ordinarily in June, we are at healthy levels of PM 2.5 in our air.
Our next question comes from Wally in Manhattan for Dr. Basan, who asks, it is a major event. Is there any guidance or advice for attending the Belmont Stakes this weekend?
Thanks. Yeah, events are proceeding as planned. Two messages. If you are worried about attending an event, but you still would like to attend, please wear a mask. If you're attending an event outdoors and you fall into one of those vulnerable categories, you're a very young child, for parents, you're an elderly person, or if you have an underlying medical condition, please wear a high filtration mask. And for event organizers, think about who you're serving. If you're organizing an event that's primarily serving the elderly or primarily serving the disabled, think about whether you want to try to move that event indoors or postpone it altogether.
And our last question comes from Beatrice in the Bronx, who asks, I'll ask this to the table, but for Dr. Basan, as a person with chronic asthma, while we can't predict the future, as an expert, do you believe that forecasts show we will be able to return to work normally on Monday?
As Commissioner Iscol has said, forecasting is a very difficult thing to do, but if trajectories hold by the beginning of the week and with weather patterns, hopefully we're through all of this and people can return to their normal everyday lives. Look, I'm an asthmatic too. I've had childhood asthma. I deal with it every day, and this hasn't been super easy for me either. And so I'm concerned. I'm wearing a mask. If you're an asthmatic and you're worried about the air, wear a high filtration mask when you're outside.
And I would just add to that, and it's Beatrice in the Bronx. Is that who the question's from?
Correct.
So to Beatrice and to everybody else that's listening, please download or sign up for Notify NYC. You can go to 311. You can go to nyc.gov/notify. You can download the app. But if we get to very significant hazardous conditions, if the forecast changes, that's going to be the primary way, one of the primary ways that you can find that information. You can also go to the health site. You can go to the air site, as Dr. Vasan said. But I would encourage you to sign up for that, and that way you'd have the most up-to-date information to make that decision on Monday.
Thank you, Commissioner. On behalf of the Adams administration, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in to today's briefing. We look forward to seeing you all at our next one. Have a great day.